Hey, everybody. Welcome back to Expanding the Conversation with Richard and Kofi.
We're
I
not we're
know
not dead, we're alive.
we've been on a hiatus for a little while, and there's a good reason. There's a good reason. And the reason is don't get hacked. All right. I had a big situation where I was wondering about a group that I started. Many of you might not know, but many years ago, I started a company that used to sell dal puri, right, in Guyana. And I had this group up on Facebook, and I was just thinking about it one day. It's weird how this happened, Richard. I was thinking about the group, and a few people had messaged me to find out that the business was still up and going, and I didn't really respond or do much about it. And then one day, as I'm thinking about this, I get this message that if your group, if you don't do something about the group, like Facebook's going to close it down. So you could imagine I was dealing, I wouldn't call it anxiety, but my mind was kind of on this. And then I see this notification came in, and I went to the notification very quickly to just kind of check it out. And it was like right between clicking it and thinking that this might be a scam, I actually went ahead and I clicked it. And then instantly, like 2 minutes later, 3 minutes, 4 minutes, I realized I made the wrong decision. And so by the time I got back to my Facebook page, two guys had already jumped in there, changed my profile picture, started putting up, of course, pictures that Facebook would not approve of. So I was able. Lucky thing I had what do you call it, like two-factor authentication. So I was able
Yeah.
to go back in through my phone, email, get a text on my phone to go in and change my password, which is the first thing I did. And then I was able to kick these hackers out and recover my account. This all happened in a matter, like this happened within 30 minutes, but they had already gone in. I think they were looking for things like credit card information. It's a sort of a distraction, but I think they're going in for financial information, really. And so, luckily, none of that stuff got taken. I basically pulled it off, cleaned it up, notified Facebook of it. But then they put this huge, all these restrictions on the account that I couldn't go online, I couldn't be part of a live, I couldn't go live, and it was like for 40 something days. And I think last week when we tried to go on, it was a big issue, and so it all cleared up. It all cleared up at the end of this last week. I was able to jump back on today. But yes, lesson is be careful. Actually, this is a very, very serious note. I'm very, very tech conscious, very, very tech aware. I used to work for companies where people were always trying to hack in to steal our technology because we're always developing new technology and we're always inventing new things. We have patents and so forth. So a lot of companies would try to hack and steal information. We know that this is a big issue, right, out there. So we were always getting training about don't click on the link. Be careful when things come in via email. And I really want to sort of encourage all of our listeners and everybody in the digital age that we live. We really have to spend a lot of time protecting our information and protecting what we've created here in terms of our digital signature, right, and our digital life. And so to have somebody sort of come in easily and do that, we really, really have to be aware. So don't click on links that seem suspicious. For example, if you see somebody messaged me today that I'm supposed to know, close family, but they don't normally message me on Messenger. And so I did not message them back. I was first to go find out who it was before I would do that. So very, very important to be careful with our online activity. There's a lot of people out there, a lot of bad people out there trying to steal things. So that's why we were away. I couldn't get online to do anything, and now I'm back. Those restrictions have been removed. And remember, busy signal, we're not going to jail again. Oh no. And we're never going to fail again. I'm never going to get hacked again, man. I'm never going to get hacked again. So we got to be careful. We really, really have to be careful out there. So that's it. But we're back. And we're ready to expand this conversation, Rich. What are we talking about?
I don't know.
Happy
Yeah,
Father's Day, by the
yeah.
way,
Happy
brother.
Father's Day to you too, and happy Father's Day to all the fathers out there holding it down, doing what they're supposed to do. we could talk about fatherhood. I mean, I think you and I touched a little bit off air about what I think there's a constant sort of changing landscape around what fatherhood means. I know we're in this time of the feminist movement. Shout out to all the feminists. I don't have anything against them, but it's interesting because I do think the need for the father in the family structure still remains super important, and sometimes I think we and all the progress we've made, we tend to. This is my personal view here. I'll let you chime in because I know you've got your own views, Kofi. But the father has traditionally been sort of the head of the home, right? So the boss, the breadwinner and the provider, and sort of like the person that that ensures that his family is protected. And so I think in the world that we live in, where women now spend more time in the workforce and oftentimes are making more bread than than the men, we tend to maybe sometimes think that the need for a man and a father in the traditional sense has changed, and I don't know that to be 100% true, but I certainly think the shift in terms of who makes how much money and maybe what a man traditionally provides in relation to what a woman provides in a family structure has changed. But does that mean that fatherhood is changing? Do we need to rethink the role we play as fathers? How do we sort of adopt and raise our boys and girls to be good future humans, right? Because it's certainly not the way it was when we were younger. My mother has always sort of been a housewife in that role. And I guess my father, when they were together, and I guess in his role when I lived with him, was always head of the house, right? But that maybe not always, but most times. But I think that's changed, right? And in my situation, my personal situation, both my wife and I work, and so we divide up duties, right? Like I tell people, my wife probably wouldn't know where to find things in the supermarket. I do most of the cooking at home, and we sort of have, we divide duties. So structure has changed a little bit, right? Back in the day, they say you can't have a dog and bark, right? So you can't have a wife and cook your own food. Yeah. That's wrong. But I do it, right? And so what does that mean in terms of the role? Maybe what does that say to your kids? I don't personally have an issue with it, right? But I think things shift a little bit, and so I know I remember a long time ago I was having a conversation with one of my friends, and I was I believe I'm a progressive man, right? I support the career woman so she could reach the highest of heights. And so I was having a conversation with this guy, and he was like, no, he was raised to be the provider for his family. And I was like, man, but if you're making $100,000 and your wife is making $200,000 and somebody's got to stay home to take care of the kids, I mean, basic common sense math says it should be you. He was like, no, I'm going to be the person going out. And I was like, that's interesting. Right. But maybe he had a good reason for that. I guess that's the way he was raised to believe that he was supposed to be the provider and the breadwinner. Some of that defies a little bit of logic, but I know that maybe some men as well maybe struggle to establish their father role as well in light of sort of the changing dynamics of households, especially where there are two career people living in the same family.
Yeah, no, Rich. So I don't know if there's a delay or anything. So just bear with me. I know we had some in it. I seem to have some slow in it. But so I as I told you, I've been thinking a lot about this. And I was just thinking, I really haven't sort of theoretically in my mind put it all together. But there's some interesting things that I am noticing in terms of my own reading on this. I like the fact that things have been modified and changed. I think the state of fatherhood today is different. You're absolutely right, different from what it used to be, in terms of men being more in tune with their children and being there and hugging and telling them that they love them. I when my children were growing up, I like cuddling with them. My son's not at that age anymore; he's a teenager. But my daughter, likes to come and cuddle and hug, and I love that because I think it gives her the sense of protection. And even for me, I think there is this sense of love, right, that comes back to me, during those kinds of interaction. And a lot of people will tell you that when they grew up, they weren't hugged and told that, yeah, I love you when they grew up with their father. So I think that that's good in many ways. The father's involvement in the home, and in the lives of the children has been very, very positive, I would say, overall. Whether it be in school or in cooking or in whatever means, in taking the children, whether to taekwondo or to football or whatever it could be. I think that that's pretty solid. I also feel, though, Rich, that there's some things today that aren't as good as they used to be. And I don't know yet how we address that, right? With two working parents in a home, it has its benefits from a financial perspective. But like you said earlier, it can also mean that the children are neglected and don't get the attention, right, from the parents that they would need, right? So you've got both parents out there working, and maybe somebody else is raising those children. And so your impact on your children isn't always as it used to be, right? Because now they're being impacted by YouTube and Facebook and social media on the whole, and everybody else. And so, whilst you are providing, bread, right, and income and all of these things, there's still 24 hours in a day. And with both working parents, sometimes it's challenging to really address the issues of the children. And sometimes we're not even aware of what the children are dealing with. And so there are other aspects of the family that struggle. And I'm not against, and I want to be very clear, I'm not against working, both spouses working and things like that. That's not what I'm getting at. I'm trying to say that I think we need to take the good that we have today, and there used to be some good from the traditional role, and find what maybe is sort of an in-between, right? To kind of make that work. Now, mind you, things like divorce rates are pretty high today. With everybody working and trying to create sort of their own stability and their own sort of security, that also means that they say the number one reason that a lot of marriages fail is because people lack this commitment to the marriage, right? Because of this sort of individual track. Mommy wants her own career, daddy has his own career, and if that's not working out, well, forget it. We move on to a next relationship, and then the children are suffering as a part of that. So I think how mommy and daddy play the role as supporters to each other and as partners to each other, to keep that union, which is really important, to keep that union functioning, is what's really important in my view, more than just looking at necessarily the traditional roles, right? We have to do what it takes to keep that unit together for everybody's sake. And I'll tell you why. Married men live longer than single men. All right. And so this thing has an effect on health and even longevity. I mean, and this is really serious. So it tells me, Rich, that the nature of the relationship that we have, right, with our spouses and in our family and with our children, has a huge impact on our happiness, right, our overall stress level, right, and our ability to live happy, fulfilling lives. You see? And so finding your right role within the marriage and within the family is really, really important. So, for example, I think if your buddy is raised to feel like he's the provider, and that's his drive, I mean, I think he's got two options, right? He either modifies, or he finds a spouse that can allow him to live out, right, playing that role. Because I don't think it's a bad role. I mean, this guy wants to provide, right? This is not bad. This is great that he wants to do this. So relationships where they can achieve that, or they enter into relationships where they're more flexible and they're able to modify, kind of like what you mentioned. I also, being married, started off early in marriage, actually being the person who used to cook a lot as well. I love cooking since my childhood, and when I'm home and my wife goes out to work, I would cook and make sure everybody comes back home, because we used to have this saying in our home, like, regardless of who's home or who's not home, everybody's got to eat, and both of us know how to cook. Right? So if you're out, I'm cooking, right? And if I'm out, then you're cooking. And even if we're not cooking, the goal is not cooking. The goal is making sure that nutrition in the family is given paramount importance. So everybody's got to eat, right? So even if you buy the food, or you order the food, or you ask somebody to cook the food and bring the food over, right? The goal is to get food into the family, right? The goal is to get food into the family. However you make that happen. So I think that there's got to be some flexibility. Let me sum this up. I think there's got to be some flexibility, no doubt. But I also think that we can't go so overboard in this sort of new way thinking that I'm the wife, and because of modernity, I don't have to do these things, or I'm a husband, and because of traditional thing, this is not my role. I think that we need to have a conversation about, what makes both parties happy in that relationship, right? In terms of taking on those different roles, both as a father and as a mother. And I think that's important, because there's no point in the man taking on these roles, Richard, when he's miserable, because he's not going to be a good father, right? And I think that has to be taken into account as well.
Sorry, yeah, no, those are all great points, Kofi. What I struggle with is, and I struggle with this across life, in every realm of life. There isn't so much of a question that we need to rethink things and do things, and I guess think holistically about the changes that's happening around us. The problem is that there's no guidebook, right? There's no active conversation happening around these topics, and it becomes very sort of it becomes very very touchy to discuss some of these things, because for fear that you may offend somebody. So we're not going to get there. We're not going to approach it, or we just stay in our corners, right? We don't believe that some of these struggles and some of these questions are things that anybody else has. It's just really things that we struggle with. But I think it's worth a discussion, and maybe just to figure out, like, where do we go with some of this, right? Because you're right, where I think we've made all this progress, where maybe money is no longer the big issue, right? But we've got all these other problems, right? Some or the other, even though we have more resources and everybody is more educated than they've ever been, which is interesting, because you would think if you're more educated, you'd make better decisions, but we still can't seem to figure out how to make marriage work. And maybe if you're too educated and too learned, maybe that's why you struggle with being married in the beginning. But where do we go, Kofi? How do we move this conversation from you're on mute there? How do we move this conversation from just talking about it to something that makes sense, right? Because, like, I'm a very sort of structured visual person. Like, I want to see a flow chart, right? Like, if yes, do X and Y. If Y works out, then do A, B, like something to that degree, right? Because it's kind of like it's not something that we talk about. It's not something that we understood. It's not something that sort of we have any kind of blueprint to follow, right? Like, I've always said that I'm in a position where it's the first time I've been here, and it's all new to me, right? Like, the dynamics of my day-to-day life isn't something that I could look to, a relative or two relatives or three relatives or a friend or two friends to say that, okay, that's exactly like mine, and they've done an incredible job. I'm going to go sit with them and ask them some questions and follow their model, because it just doesn't work out that way, right? And so how do we make sense of it without sort of taking shots at each other and end up having just fights, right? Because I'm sure a lot of times this is why maybe relationships struggle. because people just fight over it. So
Yeah,
where do we go? Is there a school
Rich man.
for
I don't know. I don't have. I don't want to purport that maybe I have the answer. Jeremy is saying here that if I'm understanding what he's saying, is that he thinks some of this could be disproportionately affecting women in the sense that both parties are working, but a woman is still expected to maintain her role as mother in nurturing and caring for children. So even if that man is working, he still maintains the role of all his sort of traditional roles, are maintained. Whereas a woman is taking on an additional role of also providing, but still expected to fulfill all her traditional roles as well. And so he thinks that she could be carrying a little bit more of the burden than just what the man is carrying. But I think Rich, that it's a serious conversation, and I think the conversation starts with um, you know, and I think you mentioned it earlier. It's what really drives us, and what are we really trying to achieve here? Um, there are a lot of people out there. There's a lot of women out there, for example, who have gone and they've studied, and they are now professional women, and they're highly educated. And what the research is showing is that they're having a difficult time finding partners, right? And one of the reasons is that those kind of women, of course, don't want to marry downwards, right? They want to marry upwards. And so the more they rise and they look for men within their category, there are fewer men in that category. And so the challenge is that it becomes very difficult to find somebody there. And those men oftentimes are looking for someone else or something else. I read recently or watched a video recently. I think it was Peterson that was saying that women think that 80% of men are undesirable, and men think that 50% of women are desirable or undesirable. And so I think for women have this particular challenge, right? To speak to Jeremy's point, women have this particular challenge in that women are always there's always a smaller market of men, right, that women compete for in the sort of dating and marriage market, than what men are looking for, right? And so it's very common to find, for example, a man who has gone out and built a life, earn and do all this stuff, to just be able to say, I'll find a woman, she's not working, and he's achieved something, and she comes home and take care of the kids, and you have sort of this traditional sort of relationship that is established. Whereas when you have a professional person and you get married, this issue comes up, right? Because you're not going to ask your wife who has found meaning in work and in life to simply say, like, no, you got to stay home and take care of the kids. And it's very difficult to say that to a man as well, who is driven, right, to go out and earn and do certain things. So I think it's a real dilemma, is the point I really want to make. It's a real dilemma, and it's a real dilemma for professional, like educated women in particular, who are in relationships with men, particularly maybe in the middle class, where one party isn't earning a significant amount of money to really drive the family to where it wants to be. So it does require them both to work. And so I think maybe in this case, understanding is necessary, right? And I think it might become imperative for the husband to step up and take on some of those traditional caring and nurturing roles. And for some men, it may not come that natural, right? Because they're not mommy. Um, but I think there needs to be, and I've heard a lot of good fathers like we talked about. So I think it becomes really important to have like outlets where your wife can get a break, or your wife can get assistance, to help do some of that role. I know in some cases people hire a nanny, like we talked about earlier, if you're making enough money to do that, or to have a family member or somebody like that come in the home and take on some of that burden. I mean, one of the things I think as well, Rich, is I'm going to say, is that a lot of families today are nuclear families. Remember, many of us grew up in extended families where there were uncles and aunts and grandparents around, but many of us have gone off and started our own family, and we don't generally have a lot of family around to like drop these children off to. And so I remember when I was young, my mother was a working mom my entire life, and on certain times she'd be able to take me and drop me off by the grandparents, or her brother or sisters used to come over and spend time at the house to help care for their niece and nephew. So I think we have to lean a little bit on that extended family as well, right, to help raise those children and look for ways to remove that burden. So husband's got to step up. I think family's got to step in there. And if you can afford it, you might have to go after someone like a nanny or someone that can care um, for those children. The other thing I'd say is having sort of that support network where you've got other friends whose children want to play with your children. I don't know. I know things have changed drastically here in Guyana, but also in the United States. It's children have to have play dates. I never had a play date, man. I just went on the street. Everybody was playing on the street, but that doesn't really exist in a lot of communities anymore. Where so parents have to get together and say, because sometimes your children home all the time can be a little taxing as well, right? Like you don't mind them going off to school, but one of the things that gives me the greatest joy, Rich, is to see my kids off with other kids playing and doing their own thing. That gives me joy. Plus, they're away. I get some free time for myself. But also, it's kind of fulfilling to watch them hang out with other kids. So I think having that kind of support where you could drop your kids off by someone's home and play with their kids, and they could drop theirs off by you. So you take turns, right? Like that, right? Really helps to relieve mommy in particular of having to carry that dual role of bread earner and also mommy at the same time. So I think some of those strategies could help.
Yeah, I mean, I live in a world where many of those things are sort of a continuous work in progress. That Jeremy's point, I think, requires a whole conversation. I certainly think there's a lot of misinformation spread about the point that he's making there.
Yes.
But I also know that a lot of times there is sort of I'll say this even in my own circumstance, right? Like when I met my wife and I decided I was gonna go after this good looking girl, I didn't really think about where it was gonna go, who was gonna make the money, who was gonna play the support role, who was gonna give up what for who. I just knew that I wanted to be with this person, right? And so I don't think that's unusual. I don't think anybody does it. Very many people, at least, do it very differently. And so we don't ever have that conversation. But if, as you pointed out, that if you end up having a relationship with a guy that's driven to go make his money and hopes that there's somebody holding down the fort at home and taking care of things, and then all of a sudden, the woman decides, well, I don't mean all of a sudden, but along the way, the woman decides that though she wants to have a career too, then it requires like an intense negotiation, right? To figure out like, where do we go? How does this work? As you said, right? Do we bring in help, or is it that you just have to give up everything? And a lot of times, I think the data says as well that women are the ones that file for divorce most of the times. Which means that if a woman's not getting help and she feels like she's carrying the brunt of the load, and she's willing to give up the little bit of help that she has, then something is wrong with that information, right? It doesn't quite add up. And I think and there's been some effort on the virtual world to help correct some of that misrepresentation, because I don't think it's 100% true. But like I said, I think that's a conversation for a whole nother day, and maybe we can invite Jeremy to join us and have that conversation. But I do agree that we have to keep thinking about it. And maybe start talking about it more, because it's changing. Things are changing. They're not what they traditionally used to be, and I know this. And it's the same thing for all of us. But we need to continue to expand the conversation. I'll end there because I know we've gone past our time.
Yeah, we got past. We had to make up for it, man. It's been a while. But no, this is it's a good conversation. I wish all the fathers out there a happy Father's Day. Be good to your children. Be kind to your children. Spend some time with them. I miss mine. I'm always back and forth. It's a new phase of life. And so I hope it, it doesn't have to go on for forever, but I'm always looking for ways to stay connected with my children. My daughter and I, for example, we do. She's into video editing, and that's something I do. And I'm always just amazed that at 8 years old she can edit videos like me at my age, and so we get to bond over things like that. And my son and I love to debate and talk about a lot of different things, and so we get to bond over things like that. Before I go, Rich, let me say my poem that I wrote for them. Before I get off air, it says, "Being a father makes me want to be stronger, live longer, work harder. The day I had my son and my daughter, my life changed forever. My children fuel my desire to be better, inspire my drive to rise higher, go further, cross border. Gonna make life, however, be a fighter, survivor. Don't give up. Oh, never. Gonna make the world a lot better. Be a father." Mic drop.
Good stuff.
All right,
I love
man.
it. I love it. Good stuff, man. All right, guys.
All right.
Hope everybody
Happy
enjoy the
Father's
rest
Day,
of their
guys.
Father's Day.
Take care. Take care.